Not every story on Reddit is just fiction. Some are warnings, some are cries for help, and some are never supposed to be read at all. Tonight, we dive into the darkest corners of the internet. Stories you'll wish you could unhear. Welcome to Scary Reddit Stories. Let's begin. Story number 1. A few years ago, I was walking through the woods off the beaten track a bit, and I smelt this really overpowering sweet smell. Being nosy, I pulled back the undergrowth to have a look and found a dead body. The guy had clearly been there a while and wasn't looking great, all swollen and green and black with various runny bits. The local wildlife had also been dining well for a few days. I called the police, who told me to wait with the body until they arrived. Being in the middle of nowhere, it took a while for them to arrive, and it got dark, and I was just sat there in the dark with him for a long time. It turned out he had committed suicide. For a long time afterwards, I had dreams about him, and he would talk to me, and not nice things. Mainly about how he was angry. I had disturbed his resting place, and he wanted me to kill myself. Probably just my imagination, but all pretty disturbing at the time. He still turns up in my dreams from time to time, and no doubt will be tonight after typing this. Probably time. Story number 2. About 2 years ago, I was driving home from a family reunion pretty late at night, and the drive was about 2 hours. I didn't stay the night because I had to be back for work the following day. Most of the drive was on roads with dense bushes and trees on either side, the real creepy ones you see a lot in movies. Anyway, I had been driving about 45 minutes, and I was starting to get really tired. You know how sometimes you just suddenly become really tired, out of nowhere? Well, yeah, that happened to me. I knew I wasn't going to last, but I didn't come across any place that I felt I could park and safely sleep. Anyway, after it became clear to me that I wasn't going to find a place to pull up, and my tiredness wasn't going away, I did something very questionable. I pulled over to the side of the road onto the grass, behind some bushes, to try and hide my car from anybody else who was going to come past. The roads weren't empty. I came across another car every few minutes or so. I made a mental note that the time was 11:22 and then fell asleep. Sometime later, I was awoken by a scratching sound. I looked at the clock, 11:50. The sound stopped after a few seconds, and because I was still extremely tired, I didn't bother looking around and simply went back to sleep. I was later awoken by the same sound, and it was now 12:40. This time it really freaked me out, because the sound didn't stop. The thought ran across my mind that it was just an animal inspecting the car, but why would it return almost an hour after it had left the previous time? I looked in my rearview mirror and just managed to catch a glimpse of something running away into the forest. Now, at the time, I thought it was the damn hook killer, you know, the one that scratched that couple's car and then slaughtered the guy when he got out to investigate? Fuck that, I thought to myself, so I got the hell out of there. There was a bend no more than 100 yards up the road, and as I came around it, there was a fucking car, parked off to the side of the road with the driver's side door opened. I slowed down just to look to see if anyone was in there. There wasn't. Then I looked in my rearview mirror. I didn't see anything, and all of a sudden, this guy comes sprinting around the corner. He starts screaming at me, shouting stuff like, "Hey! Hey you! Get the fuck out of your car! Now!" I noped the fuck out of there and sped off. I never saw the guy again. Moral of the story? Don't fucking sleep on the side of a deserted road. Story number 3. A few summers ago, I went for a bike ride around midnight with a friend. We went our separate ways at the end of the evening, and I had about 2 blocks to ride back by myself. Because of construction, I had to ride on the sidewalk, but the streets were dead. But it wasn't a problem until right where I was about to turn left onto my street. There was this man walking by himself, maybe 40s, a little scruffy but not homeless. The sidewalk was narrow, and I didn't want to freak him out, so when I got about 6 feet behind him, I said, "Hey, behind you!" And he turned around and gave me this super angry look. I turned down my street, and he started to follow me, literally screaming about how I was a fucking cunt and he was going to kill me and all that. I live right off the corner, and I didn't want him to figure that out, so I decided to do another loop around the block. That's not the scary part. The scary part is that when I looped back around and looked down the street, I saw him standing on my fucking front stoop, staring out at the street like the motherfucker knew I lived there. He saw me ride by again, but he didn't say anything. I ended up going back to the friends, but my bike got stolen from the alleyway by the house 2 days later. Edit, the guy in question was definitely not actually homeless. We have a large population of mentally ill in that area, unfortunately, downtown of a medium-sized city, so if I didn't think the sidewalk was too narrow to pass otherwise, I wouldn't have disturbed him. Half the scary part was that he looked pretty much completely normal for my area. That being said, I ended up texting my mom and she made the decision not to notify law enforcement until my bike was stolen. Story number 4. I had awesome parents who let me sleep in the living room on weekend nights when I was very young because my sister was a light sleeper and I could stay up until dawn. But of course, I always end up sleeping on the couch because Nick at night made me tried. So, one night, I wake up to the prickly feeling, like an instinct. Just bolted into a sitting position and stared out the front window. We lived in rural Georgia, so you can imagine the magnitude of trees. In perfect light cast from the moon, I see a silhouette of someone in this fucking tree. The family dog dashes to the window and is snarling into the glass. Terrified, I run into my parents' room and try to explain to my parents that there is a strange person outside. Dad grabs something defensive and darts outside with the dogs to beat the wax off the hothead. I tremble in Mama's arms until Dad comes home and says he saw no one and to go to bed. I decide to sleep in my regular bedroom. I fill in my sister in as to what happened. Dad is making regular rounds in the house with a cup of coffee. We're all still and I finally think, I can sleep. Nope. I notice the man outside my window. From what I can see in the moonlight, he gives me a shush signal and runs away. Just turns around to run a straight line away. I swear I couldn't stop crying for what felt like hours. Story number 5. I was 17 and had just gotten my license. Back in high school, my friends and I had made it a mission to find abandoned houses to throw parties in. We had a few good candidates, but the motherlode was this house I would pass on my home from work. It was an undeveloped shell of a huge home with a large property in the back. I had told one of my friends about it, and one day before we went to see a movie, I took him to the house. It was about dusk in summer, so I had my headlights on. I pulled into the front of the house, and we were there for like 10 seconds tops before we pulled back to go to the main road. A minute later, this big truck pulls up behind us, with its high beams on and riding our ass. My friend and I took note of it, but paid it no mind as we headed back to the main road. At the light, I turned right, but the truck cut through the gas station at the corner and blocked us off. Out of the truck comes this big hulk of a man, and my friend and I are shitting our pants. He raps on the window and I roll it down. Now, the really freaky part is that this is a busy road, and now there was no one in sight. He asks us what we were doing at the house, and I quickly lied and said we were making a U-turn. He stares at us for a few seconds, smiles, and sends us on our way. To this day, the house remains unfinished, and I'm convinced it's a drug operation of some sort. TLDR, don't go into abandoned houses, man. Story number 6. Woke up. Clock says 3:34 a.m. I'm 17, and in my bedroom, it's pitch black, but I hear some rattling downstairs. Terrified, I quietly tiptoe to my parents' room. Weird, it's empty. Where are my parents at 3:34 a.m.? Go upstairs to my brother's room. He's usually awake all night, but while the light is on, no one is in the room. So I guess whatever those noises are downstairs, it must be them. Why are they awake? Maybe someone died? I go downstairs. In the middle of my living room is what looks like 2 men stealing our TV. No one else is in sight. I run upstairs as quietly as possible, shut and lock my door. Suddenly there's banging on the door. I wake up. It was a dream, and the relief washes over me. I look over at the clock. Weird coincidence. It's 3:34 a.m. I'm shaking, but decide to go downstairs to prove to myself that everything's fine. I go downstairs. The 2 men are in my kitchen, screaming at my parents and brother. I run upstairs to my bedroom and lock the door. 10 seconds later, I hear banging. I woke up. It's 3:34 a.m. This time, I had actually woken up and I don't manage to fall back asleep for about 36 hours. Edit. Lots of responses about lucid dreaming here. I spent most of my teens and early 20s as a lucid dreamer, discovering the techniques after a childhood plagued by very frightening sleep paralysis. I found a message board back in 1998 where I learned to at least have fun with it. The above story wasn't a sleep paralysis experience, but it was typical of the kinds of nightmares I used to have. Weirdly enough, I rarely have nested dreams anymore, and haven't had a successful attempt at lucid dreaming in a few years. My guess is that it has something to do with hormones. Story number 7. I lived in a bizarre little house as a child. It was incredibly tall and thin, like an attached house except freestanding, with 3 floors, a basement, and an attic. It was full of quirks, such as 2 fully functional fireplaces, a shower stall in the center of the basement, a backyard so small that you could not take 5 paces without hitting the fence, and an old-timey rope-pulled dumbwaiter that led from the kitchen to my bedroom. I loved that weird little place, but unfortunately, it was incredibly old, and half of its charm was the fact that it seemed to have been designed by an inarticulate conclave of lunatics, and eventually the repair costs exceeded what my parents were willing to sink into it, and we had to move. Preparing for the move was a chore. I packed most of my stuff myself, and I had taken to throwing stuff down the dumbwaiter and shoving all my clothes so thickly in my closet that they became a single solid brick of fabric. While clearing that closet out, in fact, I came across a feature I hadn't noticed before, an attic entrance in the roof. Being an adventurous kid, I opened her up, stood on the closed brick, and began my first and last exploration into the topmost part of our weird little house. The first thing I noticed was that it wasn't as dark as it should have been. The place was strung with old red Christmas lights which still burned with leftover incandescence, and a dozen little cracks and holes peeped down into all the bedrooms below. The second thing I noticed was that the place was set up for habitation. The insulation was plasticed away, there was an old gurney piled with sleeping bags and sheets, and a rusted mint green refrigerator which still worked when I tested it. The third thing was the bones. There were a lot of bones. I was a kid at the time, with a limited understanding of anatomy, but there were bones of all types heaped into a series of piles around the center of the attic. Small and large, clean and white, from every and any imaginable sort of creature, haphazardly stacked in a half-dozen osseous clumps. 2 of them were blackened, as if someone had tried to burn them, and the walls nearest those blackened piles were scrawled in dark bone char messages. Mostly they were just smears, but the word sorry appeared more than once. That room had been sitting over my head for 8 years while I slept. Story number 8. I have a fear of spiders because of a hunting trip I took with my dad and family when I was a kid. I don't enjoy shooting things, not an animal rights activist, but I think killing for game or bragging rights and not for food is wasteful and barbaric. I had brought my Game Boy, and they stationed me at one of the ground blinds so I could use the radio to tell the others if I saw any deer headed their way. I got bored as shit and got tired of grinding in Pokemon, so I turned off my game and started rifling through my backpack to find another. As I did this, I heard a strange whooshing sound that sounded very close, but I couldn't find anything. I walked around outside the blind, and as I came around the backside, I saw that the entire outer wall was covered in a mass of fucking interlinked daddy long-leg spiders. I considered running like hell, but I had no idea where the camp was. I had been driven out to the blind. My solution was to use my can of off and the lighter from my backpack to blowtorch all the spiders off. Because stupid, that's why. The plan backfired, because I made the mistake of standing downwind of the spiders. The second the fire hit them, they all let go and flew at me. The entire wall of them. Flaming, flying spiders. I immediately started screaming and rolling around on the ground. I took off all of my clothes and immediately phoned my dad on the radio and told him to come get me and that we were going home. I have never sworn or cried so profusely in my life. I eventually went through therapy regarding this event, and now I just hate spiders in general and prefer not to be around them. Story number 9. A week after gaining my CPR certification, I had to try and perform CPR on a woman dying of a heroin, probably other drugs too, overdose. I was at a thrift store with some friends looking for Halloween costumes, and someone came in saying that someone was passed out in the parking lot. I was in the dressing room, and it just got super quiet, so I came out and told them I was certified and I'd go take a look and that they needed to call 911. I go outside and don't see anyone on the ground. Someone comes out and shouts that the person is in the car that's parked far out by itself. I ran over and honestly freaked the fuck out. She was pretty much already dead, completely blue in the face, slumped against her car window. She had the red druggy rings around her eyes, but those were blue too because she was so oxygen deprived. We opened the door, and I'll never forget that when we turned her head to see if she still had a pulse, she had tears running down her face. We pulled her out of the car, put her on the ground, and took her pulse again because the first person to do it wasn't sure. We started CPR, and the ambulance arrived about a minute after. They got her strapped up and in and continued CPR. They had another ambulance come, and those EMTs got out, and there was literally like 6 of them surrounding her. The cop told us they had administered some type of drug that can apparently reverse heroin overdoses if given in time, but she was pretty much dead already. They would do the necessary stuff until the parent could get to the hospital and call it, according to him. I also remember when we opened the door, there was heroin needles and empty pill bottles all over the floor. She wasn't very old. We also think she had kids. She had some toys and a car seat, plus 2 names tattooed on her. Edit. Wow. Thank you guys so much for the responses and the gold. It was definitely a rough situation, but for being 19 at the time, I think I handled it well. And, last but not least, Posi. Story number 10. I was delivering a hot tub to this contractor/realtor in this fancy gated community near Branson, MO. When I arrived, the construction workers were in charge of telling me where the thing was supposed to go. It was going on the 4th floor balcony, but because of the way the house was built, the 4th floor was ground floor. The other 3 floors were on the side of a hill, but the driveway was even with the first 4th floor entrance, if that makes sense. So a lot of construction going on, but to get the hot tub on the balcony, I had to make a ramp, take it from the drive, down into the yard, up a ramp to the porch, through the living room door, across the living room, out the back patio doors, onto the deck. Problem with this was, the deck was unfinished. A huge section of decking was missing. They had literally installed only enough decking so that I could go from the patio doors to the far corner of the deck where the hot tub would sit. There was no railing. The hot tub weighed 900 pounds and it was a 4-story drop if I fell. The construction workers volunteered to help me. We got it out onto the deck, crossed the narrow bridge of installed decking to the corner, and I was about to lay it down. You move these on a dolly while the hot tub is on its edge for clarification. Laying it down isn't that hard. You tilt it, bring it down to your lap, grab the strap securing it to the dolly, and lower it to the deck. It's very controlled, and I'd done it thousands of times. However, this deck wasn't finished, so the contractor wanted to leave it on its edge. It's a lot harder to take it off when it's standing up, because the dolly is under a 900-pound tub. But I've done it before. I told them that we would have to put blocks under one side of the dolly, tilt the tub, and pop the straps to release the dolly so it could be removed from the area. Then you tilt the hot tub back, remove the blocks, and then set the hot tub down on the deck. Problem: the deck wasn't wide enough to allow me to do this safely. I popped the strap on the hot tub, put the blocks under, and I tilted the hot tub. But that put me with my feet 4 inches from the edge of the deck with nothing but 4 stories of air behind me. We were able to free the dolly on one side, but not the other. The hot tub had to be leaned over further toward me. I tell everyone to freeze, and they do. I didn't want anyone messing with it because I had to shift my feet back 5 inches so my heels were off the deck. I'm freaking out, but it's all going smooth. I have a construction worker on each side of me helping support the tub, 3 construction workers freeing the dolly, and 1 useless worker playing with the strap that is going to secure the tub to the house so that the wind doesn't blow the tub over. We are inches from having the dolly freed when one of the construction workers freeing the dolly gets impatient and kicks the corner of the tub to dislodge it from the dolly. It works for him, but unfortunately for me, I didn't have my feet set yet. I shout that I'm falling. The 2 guys beside me take the weight of the tub, but no one can get to me. My arms are windmilling. I'm bent almost double backwards, trying my damnedest to stay on the deck. I can see the boulders down below, out of the corner of my eye. I'm falling, and there isn't anything I can do about it. I feel myself go. I'm falling. My heels slip out from under me and no one can reach me, but then suddenly, I'm flying forward. Something is under the small of my back, and it's slamming me into the bottom of the tub. The dolly is removed and the tub stood up with me hugging it before I find out what saved me. The useless guy playing with the strap had already secured one end to the house. When I fell, the strap was already behind me, hanging off the deck. The construction worker pulled it tight with all his might, arresting my fall. It wasn't there for that purpose, but he saved my life that day. I would have been dead if not for him. I thanked him by sending him and his wife and kid to Breckenridge, Colorado for Christmas. It was actually a vacation I had saved for and was about to surprise my wife and daughter with, but I felt he deserved it more. Plus, my wife and daughter didn't know anything about it. Yeah, that was one of my most scariest moments ever. If you've made it to the end of this, thank you so much. And I'll see you in the next one. TLDR, fell off a 4th floor deck, but construction workers saved me at the last moment. So I rewarded him with a vacation to Breckenridge, Colorado.